All right, welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily. Glad to be with you on this, what is it, Tuesday? Everybody, some people had a holiday yesterday, some people didn't. We didn't. We were with you yesterday, and we're glad to be back with you today. It's Jacob Albracht, Paul Savage in hour number one. Tommy will join us in just a little bit. Happy to have a Paul Savage Tuesday here with you. The KFH hotline is open at 869-1240. Jad Chambers producing, manning that. We'll give away some HTOT and coffee a little bit later. We'll tell you about a big giveaway we have coming up later. All kinds of good stuff today to get to. A lot of stuff from yesterday to react to as well. Paul, happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing just great. It's nice to be back on with you again, and Tommy's going to join us again, and the three amigos will be together once more.
It's always a good time on these Tuesdays. They're no longer, Dan Israel Tuesdays, as the NFL season is officially behind us, and it's on to the next one. I want to get Paul's take on this offseason for the Chiefs. Priorities for Paul. We've laid those out for you. But what is Paul thinking about that in a very busy to come offseason for Kansas City? We'll get into that. We'll get into K-State last night. We've got, coaching record book type things happening, which is always the place to bring in our resident historian, Paul Savage. The Royals, we didn't get to this yesterday, but they added another significant piece to the bullpen over the weekend. I want to touch on that as well as they continue their feverish offseason to try and put a contender on the field next year. And among other things, it's a busy show today, Paul. Glad to be here with you. You fired up and ready to go?
Ready to go. Let's do it. K-State probably is first on your agenda. Am I right or wrong on that one?
It's topical. Are you filled up? Let me ask you this too. Are you filled up on your Prairie Fire coffee? Paul's there in studio.
Yes.
There's always a big old tub of Prairie Fire coffee anytime you're in there that we always appreciate having for the staff at Odyssey all across the building. So you got your coffee, you got your caffeine. Here we go.
That's right.
K-State last night. That was going to be a tough test at Austin on a short turnaround from the TCU game. They lose by 6. They cover the number. It was relatively competitive, although Texas, I think, controlled the game most of the way through. 3 straight losses now for K-State. And I would say in unlikely rest of the way to try to get into the NCAA tournament. It's not out of the question by any means. That's the beauty of playing in the Big 12 is you always have a ton of games on the schedule that can help you out, and they'll have plenty down the stretch. If they wanted to get to 500 in the conference, they'll have to finish 4-1, which seems daunting. Left on the schedule for K-State, home game against BYU, home game against West Virginia, road game against Cincinnati, road game against Kansas, home game against Iowa State. So in order to go 4-1, not only do you have to beat BYU, you also will have to either come up with a win in Lawrence or a home win against Iowa State. So it's all daunting. And that's if you think 9-9 is going to be good enough. I'm not convinced totally that it will be good enough, but that's been the target, I think, for Coach Tang and this coaching staff. Just a quick reminder of how disappointing and gut-wrenching the loss to TCU is. If they don't lose on that buzzer beater, it's quite a bit different here this morning. But the reality is, Paul, they've lost 3 in a row to 3 teams that are very likely going to be in the NCAA tournament. But it's tough sledding right now for the Cats, and their backs are as firmly against the wall as they have been all season.
Well, that's exactly correct. But, you look at this league, and I think to myself, this is the best conference in America. Basketball-wise, this is as good as it gets anywhere in the country. And when I think of that, I think 9-10 teams. I think 9 or 10. Both of these teams from last night, Texas and K-State, I think are probably it. Now, Kansas State's got to make a case for themselves, I believe, and that is to win a few more games. The same goes with Texas. I mean, Texas is still 6-7 in the conference, and K-State's 5-8. You got to make a run. You got to win a few games. That being said, show me a game that they can't win on their schedule going out. And I mean anybody, and it doesn't matter who it is, even Houston. Houston can be beat. They've lost Houston's and really in charge of this league at this
Well, not
very.
at home they can't. That's
Well,
something
not
to
at home.
consider.
Okay,
Houston,
good point.
Houston, Iowa State,
Good
and
point.
Kansas, Paul, have not lost home games.
Right, good point. Very good
So
point.
those 3 of those teams have not lost a game at home. Here's what's wild about the league.
Yes.
I'm gonna exclude West Virginia.
Yeah, please do.
The worst record at home in this league is 10-5. Even Oklahoma State, who's really struggled this year, is 10-5 at home this year. Right. So you're looking at the worst record, the worst home record in the league this year is 10-5. If you, again, excluding West Virginia, who's their season's been a disaster without, Huggins and all those things. Paul, if I told you 10 teams are going to make the NCAA tournament, we would obviously support and be fine with that, right?
Well, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'd love
Kansas
to
State
see
wouldn't
it.
be in. If they took 10, Kansas State wouldn't be in.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality. They're at 11 or 12 right now of 14. So even if it was 10, and I think it's more likely going to be 9 than 10. I hope it's 10. I think it should be 10, but that's a pretty big leap. I think it'll probably be 9. Even if it was 10, Kansas State's not in right now. And so as we look at the rest of their season, the problem for Kansas State, and we've mentioned this, but it's really coming now into focus, of the 10 teams we think could get in right now, they're all within the top 40 of the net, right? So Oklahoma is at 39, Cincinnati's at 37, Texas is at 33. You go up to TCU, they're at 36, right? Everybody else is quite a bit higher than that. Kansas State's down at 81. They're still even behind UCF there. So it will. This is why I don't think that 9-9 is maybe even good enough, because they have to jump one of those teams. They either have to jump Cincinnati, Texas, Oklahoma, or TCU. If you're going off of the net rankings, which is what we're told to go off of, they're going to need to make up almost 50 spots in the net just to get to number 10. Remember, it's not by conference standings that we have to look at this. It's by that net ranking. It's by these metrics, the analytics, the things that the tournament committee uses. They've got to move close to 50 spots over one of those teams. So it's not only going to take a Herculean effort, I think, for K-State to win a bunch of games. It's going to take one of those teams falling hard down the stretch, too. I think both of those things would have to happen for Kansas State to be able to get in. That's what makes this so difficult.
Gosh, I almost feel naive because I was going to make a comment about teams getting in, and you come with the analytics, and I know it's a lot of that, and yet I was good. And maybe this is naive on my part, but being a human being and wanting to see human beings still rule the world, no AI, please, no AI. AI can take your place, take my place, none of that, please. I was going to say part of the reason why K-State gets in is the utter respect that everybody has for Coach Tang. And that's got to be worth 10 points in the Palm ratings, doesn't it? I mean, it's got to be worth something. Now, I know that's naive. I know I'm being naive, and I know you're going to jump on me for being naive. But I kind of like – now, K-State's got to help themselves. I like their chances of getting in if they win a few games. They win a couple of extra key games down the stretch. Of course, they've got to win some games. Right now, they're sitting at 5-8. They're 5-8 in the conference. I mean, that's not going to get it. You got to get at least close to 500. But on the other hand, it's the best conference in America. There's nobody that debates that. Nobody. And
so I just want to take you through, Paul. The Athletic did a nice job with this last year, sort of studying the history of the net.
Right.
So historically, I mean, there have been teams in like the 30s and 40s that don't reach the NCAA tournament. There have also, on the other side of that, so as of February of last year, so this does not include last year's tournament, but this was the research they did coming into this. St. John's was in 2019 got in with, as these are at-larges, right? These aren't just teams that won a tournament. St. John's had a 73 and got in a season. Wichita State actually had a 72 and got in. Then Michigan. It's happened. It looks like 5 times that a team worse than 60 in the net has been in. Never a team higher than 73. Remember, K-State's at 81 right now. And the thing that got those in, according to their research, It was the amount of high quality wins those teams had, quad one wins that got them in. So despite that overall net rate, and that is where I think you hold out hope for Kansas State, is that you've got these quality games left on the schedule plus a conference tournament. If they can collect a handful, and I'll just pull up the net rankings. I don't know how many right now. Um, Let me just look and see how many quad one wins Kansas State has at this very moment, because there is a chance, right? If this league is really, really good, Kansas State right now with quad one has 2 quad one wins. They have a ton of, they're just 6-10 in quad one and two, but they do have 2. So if they could pick up down the stretch, and I don't know what will constitute as quad ones, BYU at home probably does.
Top 25.
Cincinnati on the road will be close. Kansas on the road will certainly be there, and Iowa State at home might be. So you've got an opportunity. I think, if I understand quad ones correctly, and it's really complicated, I think there are 4 quad one possibilities left on the schedule for them. So then you get into this question of, well, what if they end up with 5 or 6 quad one wins? Well, historically, that's been enough for teams. Michigan State in 2021 was 70 in the net, but they had 5 quad one victories. Wichita State was apparently the outlier. They didn't have a ton of quad one and two wins back in 2021, but when they got in. So it's not an exact science, but it does, I think, paint a picture for K-State of what's out there and what has to be done and these final games. I don't think they're getting in unless they go 4-1. West Virginia is sort of a throwaway game. It doesn't help you. So, that means you got to go then 3-1 against BYU, Cincinnati, Kansas, and Iowa State. 2 of them are at home, 2 of them are on the road. They're going to have to win a really big road game for this to work for them. You either have to beat Cincinnati or Kansas on the road. And you probably either need to beat BYU or Iowa State at home also, or both, quite frankly, if you're going to try to get in. I hope that they have a case, and I hope that they can collect enough of these quad one wins. Well, really, I hope that the NCAA tournament just takes like 10 or 11 Big 12 teams. That's what I really hope, because the league has been incredible this year. But that TCU game just keeps standing out to me, Paul, as one that, man, they had to have that one. And we talked about it before, and it's just really, really hard, but they had to have that one, and they didn't get it. And now it's just, it will take a really special effort late in this season to get them into the NCAA tournament.
Well, and that's exactly right. And of course, Iowa State or Kansas, you got to have one of those wins at least. And right now, if you watched any of the game last night, which I watched a good chunk of, I mean, I watched enough to know that Kansas State, as good as they are and as good as I kind of want them to be, because I really enjoy Coach Tang, the way he coaches. I enjoy his relationship with the university. I'm a big Coach Tang fan. And as much as I want them in, reality is that it may not be. I want them in. This is the best conference in America. I still think this conference is entitled to at least 10 teams, because it's that good. I mean, there's going to be teams that go in, and we obviously know that on some leagues, a champion is going to go in. A champion of a particular league way down the row is going to get in, and they're not even close to being as good as K-State is. But K-State, when you look at this league, there's some things that there are some problems. I mean, they're losing some games that perhaps they need to win. I mean, they're 5-8 in the conference, for goodness sakes. I mean, you got to do better than that. So I guess I'm just saying that I have hopes that they get in, but it looks like to me the league's only going to get 9 in, and 9 may be pushing it. It may be 8. I hope 9.
Well, they'll have 10 that have, they'll have 10 that have resumes. I mean, they'll have 10 inside the top 40. If it stood right now, Paul, you'd have 10 inside the top 40 of the net playing in this league. Like, there would be easily cases you could make. Like, if I go back to that same article and look at the best teams to not make it, by that same, scenario.
Right.
If you look at the 5 highest to not make it, the most egregious was NC State had a net of 33. So you've seen teams, there's a 33, a 35, right, a 38. So you've seen teams in sort of that mid-30 area not get in. It happened to Texas in 2019. Right now, if you go in and you look at the Big 12, there are 4 teams in that stratosphere, right? In that sort of mid to high 30s. You've got TCU in there. You've got Oklahoma, Texas, and Cincinnati. They're all in sort of that range in the 30s. But if you go to quad 1 wins, Texas has 4 of them. TCU has 3 of them. Cincinnati has 3. Oklahoma has 3. Oklahoma's been worse than K-State in quad 1. So it'll be tough. I don't know if it's going to get to 10, but it'll probably be. That's why I think it'll be 9.
Right.
I think they're going to leave one out.
Right.
And whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent is, I mean, we debate that every year.
Right.
You got to be better to be a slam dunk case. But K-State's behind all of them still.
Right. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. The main problem is this league's beating each other up. I mean, this league is literally beating each other up.
That's not a problem.
Well,
no. It's not a problem, Paul, because that's how you can end up with a team who's 10th right now in the Big 12, right? 10th in the league, still has a 37 net ranking. So it's a good thing as much as it's a problem, because it allows you the possibility to collect quad 1 wins just about every night.
Until you lose that one, you can't afford to lose. I mean, until that happens.
But we know that wins mean more than losses. Like, wins mean way more than losses when they come down to these things.
Until it happens,
yeah. A win is so much more valuable than a loss hurts you. We've seen that time and time again. So I would take the other side. Like, you'd like to be in the league where a bunch of teams are getting in, even though the path is difficult. You get chances to improve your resume every single night in this league, except for, like home games against West Virginia. That's it. And Oklahoma State. Every other time they play, they're looking at an opportunity to boost that resume. So it's an opportunity too for K-State here down the stretch. It's just 3 losses in a row. It makes it tough. Again, it's a TCU loss that is really stinging, I think, today for Wildcat fans. It was at home. It was a buzzer beater. Those hurt worse. They've lost 2 buzzer beaters. They had that game on the road. We'd be having a totally different conversation if Tech didn't get them by a point on the road when K-State looked like they were going to win that game to open the Big 12. All the little things that are happening that add up to those tournament resumes are fascinating. But they don't get it done in Austin last night. Now they get a nice little stretch here to kind of chill and hang out because that's, you play the Monday that it comes when you get a home game against BYU. And if TCU was must win, BYU is even more so on Saturday at Bramlage, a chance to beat those guys and get the resume. If they don't beat BYU, Paul, they're not getting it.
They're not getting it. Yeah. No, there's no question.
No matter what, unless they win the conference tournament, that'll be it. So we'll see. That adds the pressure there. It may have already happened. It may have been that way with TCU, but it's certainly that way this weekend with BYU. All right. When we come back, we'll switch to a little football talk. We have not heard from Savage on this Chiefs offseason. So if Paul is in charge, if Paul is in Brett Veach's chair with all the things that have to happen, L'Jarius Sneed, Chris Jones, a left tackle, a wide receiver, the 2 middle linebackers, all those things are there. How does Mr. Savage prioritize them? We'll remind you how I prioritize them, and we'll get into that as we make our way through. Want to tell you about an opportunity you've got, though. KFH and Taco Bell have your chance to win a trip for 2 to the College Hoops Championship Tournament in Kansas City. It's March 13th through the 16th to cheer on those Kansas schools or whatever school you might want to root for. The trip includes 2 all-session tournament passes and 3 nights hotel accommodations. To enter, simply text TB BIG to the number 20357. You want a complimentary breakfast burrito? Just go to kfhradio.com, click on the events page, download the voucher, and then head to any Wichita and surrounding Taco Bell locations, with the exception of Hutchinson. Your chance to see the College Hoops Championship Tournament and snag a complimentary breakfast burrito from Taco Bell happens here on KFH. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Sports Daily. Paul Savage alongside me, Jacob Albracht. Tommy Castor will join us for hour number 2. Jad Chambers producing. We'll have a giveaway of some HTO a little later in the show. Stay tuned to that KFH hotline at 869-1240. Paul, we've talked a lot, quite frankly, about this Chiefs offseason. I don't think we can talk about it enough because they are going to be trying to make history next year. I think it will be more difficult even than it was this year, because I think there is more that they'll need to accomplish in the offseason. The task is tall. The free agent list is very, very, very long for this team. And so when you realize the names on that list, and just, again, some of the headliners, and there's a ton of them: Chris Jones, L'Jarius Sneed, Willie Gay, Drew Tranquill, Donovan Smith. Heck, even the way their special teams played this year, I think you put Tommy Townsend in there as somewhat of a priority at punter. All of these things loom for the Chiefs. They still have room to grow at wide receiver. So if Paul Savage is sitting in Brett Veach's chair, with all that stands before Brett Veach this offseason, where does Paul Savage go? I've told people here, Paul, that I would prioritize left tackle first. I would prioritize L'Jarius Sneed first, then left tackle, then Chris Jones, then wide receiver and linebacker are sort of a A-B situation to me. How does Paul Savage rank this for the Chiefs to be able to need to go try to get that three-peat next year?
What, did you include Chris Jones in your list? Or do you have him?
He's third.
You have him third. I have him as first. But then again, I know how, to me, it's important that you make the opposing quarterback uncomfortable. And of all the guys on the Kansas City Chiefs roster that can make a quarterback of the other team uncomfortable, Chris Jones would be the guy for me, because he does so many things other than also get sacks. He's great on the run, but we also know that he changes the pocket for a quarterback to be able to step in, because his ability to get pushed, all the things that we've talked about over the course of this last season.
Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever do it.
Oh, he could be. Before it's all said and done, we may refer to him as the best three tech to ever play the game. Could be. I mean, we might. I don't know. He's got a ways to go, because it's some pretty good ones, by the way. But anyway, with that being said, Chris Jones is mine. My next one, obviously, is an upgrade in receivers. I don't know that there's anything wrong with the receivers, but sometimes you get something in your head. You still need to make a change. You've got to get some confidence back in that receiving core. I would take a look at the receiving core. I'm not even sure who needs to move or stay or how you go about doing that. But psychologically, there's damage on that in that area of this football team. And I think even to the average fan, they would say receivers need something. I don't know what it is, but they need something. Somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to stay. Somebody's got to get better. Maybe it's a coaching situation. Maybe it's a position coach. I don't know. I don't know what it is. And because, it's hard for you and I to say because we're not there on a daily basis. I mean, we would see it if we're involved in, the meeting rooms.
Well, it would start with catching passes, right?
Well, thank you for the obvious, Captain Obvious.
One thing that might help is getting people that actually catch the ball.
Well, you think? Thank you for that. Good Lord. We're breaking news, Jad. To make a note on this, let's get a promo on that. We got to catch passes with the receivers. Did you mark that down? Yeah, Jad marked that down.
Look, Paul, here's I get it.
Right.
Not L'Jarius Sneed?
Well, he might be my third. I might come back to him. I'm coming back to him, but I'm just looking at the two.
Here's what I want to get your thought on this.
Go ahead.
You've coached defenses, and I was curious about this. So, because I think like the headline all off season, because it's more high profile, is going to be Chris Jones. But if you can only pay one of an aging defensive tackle or one of the top young corners in football, you're more interested, even with age as a factor, in that defensive line.
Well,
no, I get it. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm curious corners. From your perspective, where you think the bigger impact comes. It will be fascinating. The Chiefs have another young corner who's fantastic, who will be, have to be paid in 2 years. So it will be interesting to see because Chris Jones probably doesn't cost them, whatever it ends up being, wouldn't cost them for as long as L'Jarius Sneed potentially cost them. And do you think that the Chiefs are interested in tying up that much money in two corners? I'm not sure. It does get interesting, I think, because Sneed, like Chris Jones, I don't think the Chiefs would ever do more than a 2-year deal tops. They're not doing a long deal for Chris Jones at his age. L'Jarius Sneed, on the other hand, you're probably going to have to get into 3 or 4 years where he's pretty much guaranteed for at least that long, which then you've got to pay McDuffie in that many years. So that's why I'm so curious to hear your take on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with prioritizing Jones, but if you lose Sneed, that's a huge loss. To me, he's top priority. I think he's more important to what they do. So that's sort of where it gets into, because to me, I just don't know if they can do them both, Paul. They got to get a left tackle. I've got left tackle ahead of Chris Jones. You've got to make sure left tackle's okay. You can't roll into next season with a bad left tackle. You can't do it.
I know. And we had this conversation on our last big chat with the Kansas City Chiefs about the Kansas City Chiefs. We talked
Dan
about
Israel
even with Dan Israel, and we talked about it several times. I think we did talk about it with Dan Israel. We talked about the fact that right now with the two corners that you have, and by the way, we made the point that you have a great corner, a truly great corner. You can man up somebody. You can take the best receiver that the other team has, put that corner on him, and take him out of the game. You have a football game that's 10 on 10. And when you have a football game that's 10 on 10, advantage goes to the defense. And that's what Kansas City has. In fact, they have two of them, don't they? They literally have two of them. I don't mind matching them up man to man on the two best receivers of whoever they play. And they do a great job. And that's so important. And we talked about how important that was. I would come to that as a third. Now, part of the thing is you're talking like Chris Jones only's got a couple of months to play. I mean, that's like he's, will he even get through the rest of, next season? I don't know. But I mean, you take a guy like this who's such a great talent and a game changer. He changes everything. So I still am with Chris Jones. And I know he's getting older, but with age comes a little bit of experience. And as long as he can physically do it, that's where I start. But I like your thoughts with the two corners. And obviously, L'Jarius Sneed will be the first one because his contract's now. It's happened. It's what's got to be taken care of. But you got to get him taken care of too, because I'll tell you what, he is the guy that makes it 10 on 10. He's the guy that will make this defense be able to do a lot of things that if you can't cover or you got to play more zone, there are when you play zone, you're limited on certain things, correct? You understand what I'm saying in terms of blitz packages and how you do things and
Yeah.
what you can do with the backers.
Steve Spagnuolo blitzes his corners. There's no doubt.
And he likes to do those kind of things. So, but that means you got to have at least one corner, at least Kansas City's got two, by the way, but you got to have at least one corner that can cover, and I mean cover the dickens out of somebody and take him out of the game. And that's what L'Jarius Sneed is. That's why he's got to be paid. It's coming down to that. And I mean, if you're going to pay, if you're going to pay Mahomes, what was it? Close to, it was over a half a billion, wasn't it? It was over it. I believe it was over a $500 million. Then you've got to pay your corners, and you've got to pay your corners well, because these are truly different makers.
I know. I think
team.
they're the biggest reason the defense was so good this year, Paul. It was that secondary.
Well, that's right. No, there's no question.
And they weren't great against the run anyway.
And Spags,
they were one of the worst defenses in football against the run.
And Spags, he understands that when you can play man, you can do things. And he likes to do things with backers, and he likes to, he's a twist guy. He's a bring somebody guy. Let's go get. He's an aggressive coordinator. I think we can all agree with that. He falls under that category. And when you have corners that can cover man, you can do so much more than if you have to rely on zone. And you understand that. I think all of our listeners are sophisticated enough to understand that. And so, boy, oh boy, you're exactly right. Maybe I move up L'Jarius Sneed to number 2. Maybe I move receivers to number 3. And here's why. Because it's so obvious what you got to do with receivers. I mean,
and honestly, Paul, don't you think because Rashee Rice really developed over the course of this season that addressing receiver now seems far less difficult than it did when, the Chiefs were at their most adversity this season, sort of halfway through. At that point, it was like, they got to go get the guy, but they may already have him. And so now addressing that position to me seems far less inexpensive than it did at one point. That's why I move it down the rung. There will be a good veteran receiver that wants to come play with Patrick Mahomes and take a shot at a ring. Don't you think?
I do. I don't know. I'll tell you what. Do you want to have a Hall of Famer throwing you the ball, or do you want some rookie out of the draft throwing you the ball? Which do you want? Who do you want? I think every receiver in this league would die for the opportunity to have Patrick Mahomes throw them balls, because what he'll do, he'll extend your career, he'll up your numbers, he'll make it where you're going to make more money because of the results you're getting, but that's partly because that quarterback can get the ball to you as a receiver. So there's no question in my mind that there isn't a receiver in the league that wouldn't look and say, man, I'd like to play with Patrick Mahomes. Are you kidding me? And that's exactly what they would want to do. So you're going to go get some guys, and you're going to have some guys that want to come play, because they understand not only they have the best quarterback to play in a generation throwing you the football, but you have a chance for some jewelry as well. There's going to be the chance that you're going to take home some rings, and that's what everybody plays for. Everybody plays for that. Now, money's important, don't get me wrong, and Kansas City will pay some of these really good receivers. Well, I'll tell you what, there's still a pride factor for all these guys. I mean, you want the ring. Got to have the ring. The ring's important. And because that's how you're like, every great player, when you hear at a 3-time Super Bowl champion, that makes your head kind of, ooh, yeah, you get it. And that's what all these players like. You hit on something right there. These guys want to win too. I mean, it's important. The money's important. Don't get me wrong. The money's important. Man, you want to win, and you want those rings. It's all measured in rings. We don't say, that guy's got $40 million in the bank, do we? We say that guy's got 3 rings, don't we? That's how we guys.
It is. And look, it's going to take players that have already been paid at some point, right? And nobody's doing this and foregoing that one big payday you might get in the NFL. I want to keep this going. So you bring up the defense and trying to weigh the importance of the defensive line to the importance of the secondary. Of course, they go hand in hand, but just some things to think about with that. Let's take a quick break. I want to continue this conversation with Paul. I always love Paul's insight because he's coached defense. at a professional level, at a college level, at all these levels, and I want to get his take on it. So we'll continue this conversation, the importance of Snead versus Jones to this defense, because it may very well come down to that this offseason. Maybe they can get them both. That'd be awesome if they could. But can they get them both? And, the linebackers, I want to look at this and take you through some of it, and we'll get Paul's take. We're going to continue this conversation on the other side. It's Sports Daily. Don't go away. All right, welcome back in here to Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Paul Savage with you through hour number one. Tommy Castor will join us in a little bit. All right, Paul. So when we look at the Chiefs defense, which was the best it's been in this era of winning, and we talk about trying to maintain it, you've got a lot of things happening here. You've got big holes to fill with free agency, and some of filling those holes will be returning what you have, but at all three levels. So you have Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed, who we mentioned. You also have Willie Gay and Drew Tranquill. I can almost guarantee you that that's not going to be the priority. Leo Chenal's been really good, and they have Nick Bolton still. So I think we can realistically take it down to some conversation of Sneed and Jones. And if you look at that, the secondary this year was fantastic. One of the best pass defenses in football. The versatility of those two corners allowed Spagnuolo to do so many things. The Chiefs' run defense was not good at all. Their pass rush, though, was really good this year. Second best in the league collectively as a team, 57 sacks, trailing only Baltimore. And so I wonder, Paul, as we look at that, and Chris Jones had 10.5 of them, by the way. Great number for a defensive tackle to have 10.5 sacks. That's not an edge rusher. That's Chris Jones there in the middle, creating that kind of pressure. So as we look at it, and if you're Steve Spagnuolo and you have to be the defensive coordinator, and let's just say you can only pick one. Maybe they can do both. That's obviously the best case scenario. But if you can only do one, which one of those things, let's remove age, let's remove all of that and say just for the three-peat next season, which is harder to do without? That dynamic, versatile corner or that impact guy in the middle of that defensive line that leads to so much quarterback pressure? Which is it if you have to pick one?
Well, it's a degree of how good is each one of them, and both these guys are. I mean,
you're talking about all pros for both of them.
They're
talking, two of the best at their positions.
Well, you got to win the battle up front. So now we're not going to take into consideration the fact that Sneed will have more years left in him.
Right. I'm saying just for the three-peat.
Okay, just for the
Sneed Sneed makes more sense on the length part because he's just young.
Right, because he's young.
If we're just talking about the three-peat next year, which honestly, this is a unique situation where the Chiefs do need to consider that, right? Like, you're talking about taking a shot at history here, at doing something nobody's ever been able to do. So I do think that matters. Like, what I think short term is probably more important now than it would normally be.
If that is the case, my friend, I think what you look at is physicality of a football team. And Chris Allen at this point Chris Jones gives you that chance to be more physical than with a great corner. Because without being physical up front, teams are going to run the ball. They're going to do some things that aren't that they'll be able to take away. A guy like Sneed, his ability to defend and do whatever they want to do. If you can run the ball, who cares how good your corner is? So and corners are never really known for making tackles, and they're not going to come over and make plays on zone cutback, are they? That's not going to happen. So you got to start with the rock, and the rock of most football teams are going to be physical up front. I'd go ahead and take Chris Jones. I mean, if we're talking about the three-peat, Chris Jones is more important than Sneed. Now, in the long run, I don't know that that's the case. And as you have said, one's younger than the other. One has more years than the other. Both of them are all pros. Both of them have that potential. Well, Chris Jones is already, I think, well on his way to a trip to Canton, Ohio. We're jumping the shark a little bit with Snead, talking about Canton, Ohio. I don't think that's appropriate at this point.
Oh no, yeah, no,
not yet. One of these days we will, but not yet.
We might.
Yeah, we might. I got to be physical up front, man. I mean, I've got to dominate teams at the line of scrimmage, or you can't win football games. So I go with Chris Jones, and I know there's going to be people that debate me on that, and they will make great arguments. But man, you got to be physical in the NFL, Jacob. You got to be physical.
Well, Snead is physical. He's as physical as you get.
Well, but he's not physical where it counts, and that's in the line of scrimmage. You just
have a soft spot for D linemen. That's what it is.
Well, okay. You got me. All right. But anyway,
which is totally fine. Fine. But I don't know what the answer is. I'm thinking of this more big picture, right? Like for me, I do look at it big picture.
Well, then youth has something to do with it then, right? That's what you're saying.
Certainly.
Young talent is
wonder. I wonder how the Chiefs prioritize this. I know Chris Jones is saying he's going to be back, all of these things. I'm not convinced Chris Jones takes a team-friendly deal until he takes a team-friendly deal. He literally held out last year. So, if he can say that, I hope he does. That would be awesome because it means both of those guys could come back. But I got to see it to believe it, right? We just saw him hold out. I'm glad at on the field of the Super Bowl when everything's happy and on the stage of a celebration of a parade that he says he's coming back. But, the business gets in the way. We know Snead's not giving him a discount. He said essentially just pay me, right? Like he's getting his check. He's getting his payday. And he's never had one. He deserves it. He's earned it. He was a late draft pick. Dude's never been paid. So he deserves to get paid. The other possibility is they franchise tag one of these guys, Paul, which is probably the most likely scenario. Can they franchise tag and keep the other? I think, Chris Jones, like, hey, man, that franchise tag worked out for you pretty well last year. We're going to franchise tag you again. We'll give Snead the long-term deal. Everybody wins here. But Chris Jones showed last year that he's willing to hold out because of a franchise tag. So he probably isn't going to do that. I don't know. It's fascinating because all of this matters, Paul, because it's not like those are the only two things they have to do this offseason.
Well,
right? They have about 1 billion things.
Right.
And to me, left tackle is more important than both of them.
Well, I don't know about that, but it is. Of course, it's important. But right now, we can make a blanket statement. Older guys don't like franchise tags. They want their money, and they want it for a long term.
They want long-term
They want long-term money. So a franchise tag will probably not work well with Chris Jones at this point. Like you said, it didn't work that well last year.
And maybe it works for Snead. I mean, maybe Snead, because his number, I don't know what the tag number is for corner, but it's going to be high. It's going to be very high.
Well, for him particularly.
So maybe that worked. Well, it doesn't matter if it's him or anybody else. If you franchise tag, you get the average of the top 5 players at the position. So, you got to find a left tackle though, Paul. Like they ain't going to let Patrick Mahomes catch that blindside pressure all year.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that hardly, have we?
Well, they'll prioritize that over the other two. I don't know if it's as expensive, but they're going to go after a left tackle. They always do. They always have. They always will. And of course they should. Paul, Patrick Mahomes' most important thing to the franchise. What's the second most important thing to the franchise?
Keeping him healthy.
That's exactly right. 869-1240 is the number to call. Let's give away some HTO on the way out. Would you like a free iced tea or would you like a free Brewhouse coffee? You can get your hands on an opportunity to get one of both right now. First caller to the KFH hotline, 869-1240. The free iced tea, more than 26 flavors, good for either Wichita location or in Derby. The free coffee, good for Derby or the East Wichita location. Good luck, everybody. Jad will get us a winner. We'll come back. Hour number 2 coming up.
Sports Radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Having some fun here on Sports Daily. It has been a fun show. We're trying to sort through how to prioritize this Chiefs offseason, something we've been doing for a few days. It will be as interesting an offseason as we've ever seen. I cannot wait to see how they navigate it and try to get this three-peat. I am just like jacked up for their chances and to see how they do it. It's going to be tough. All right. So we got Tommy Castor back with us here. Paul Savage also. I'm Jacob Albracht. It is that second hour on a Tuesday, which we have a lot of fun we didn't talk about this yesterday, and let's spend some time. Look, the weather's nice outside. Football's officially in the books. We're not going like, all in on baseball just yet. But man, the Royals just keep making splashy moves here. They go and they pretty aggressively trade a prospect a lot of people like, David Sandlin, but they go get John Schreiber, who's a reliever for the Red Sox, who was sub-4 ERA last year, who strikes guys out. It wasn't his best year last year, but it was pretty good. And the 2 years prior to that, really the 1 year prior to that in Boston, he was really, really good, sub 2.5 ERA, but it solidifies a bullpen a little bit further. And the Royals have attacked these areas of need in a way that I don't think it's just, Tommy, like window dressing to try and get a new stadium. I think they have every intention of trying to go in and win the AL Central next year. And I keep wondering, like, could the Royals win the AL Central next year?
Well, I think they absolutely can compete for a division title. And I really feel like this is the first time in a long time, and I don't even know, maybe going back to 2015 or 2014, when the Royals have actually put some thought into what they're doing with their rotation and with their pitching staff as a whole. They're being strategic about it. They, wanted to go out and build a rotation, based around a couple of the guys that they already have and that they feel pretty strongly about. Cole Reagans and, I know Brady Singer, they still feel like there's optimism there with him, but, they go out and they get Michael Wacha and they go out and they sign Seth Lugo. They find ways to strengthen their bullpen, which has been an issue the last couple of years for them also. So I really feel like this is the first time in a while that the Royals have been extremely thoughtful in how they build their pitching staff, and they're building it for right now. They're not just putting it together for, down the road for a few years from now. They're putting it together for right this second.
And
Paul, go ahead, Paul,
No.
because we haven't heard from you on this Royals offseason. Like we have appreciated it so greatly because it does show a commitment to winning, but it's not just that they're making a lot of moves that I really like.
Well, and not only that, they're opening up the pocketbooks. I mean, for years and years, what was the big knock on the Kansas City Royals? We talked about, well, they won't spend any money in free agency.
Well,
they just never have.
Yeah.
And they're turning loose the Bucks. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
And they just signed, like, as you pointed out, that was a $32 million contract.
It was, yeah.
And then they turn around and sign Renfroe for a $13 million deal. And I mean, they're turning loose some bucks. They're starting to sign. I mean, it's almost like they're trying. I mean, I don't want to be,
well, they're trying for right now. They're trying for, it's not just, trying for down the road. They're trying for now.
For right now. So
the rebuild did not work. And the unfortunate circumstance of that is that it just extends the window of losing. And they're clearly not going to be willing to accept that. Their farm system is still terrible. Right? Like they still have a ton of foundational work to do. The damning thing that it felt like all year last year when you watched it is, God, there is just no hope for the future here. But you can turn that around through free agency. And look, they're not a finished product yet. And they're still going to have young players develop. But if you look at a bullpen now that takes some of the skill they had, and it adds Will Smith, who's old as dirt. I get it. Chris Stratton, I mean, he was a part of a World Series team last year. They've added 2 or 3 arms to the bullpen, which will help. The starting rotation, you pointed out, Tommy. I mean, I can't even, it's not even close how much better this rotation should be than the last. And that also may help the bullpen too. Because
but don't you think that was part of what they did, over the last few years, is just kind of throw some arms in the rotation? I mean, other than Greinke, right?
Well,
there really wasn't, and I guess Brady Singer to an extent, it was kind of like, all right, we've got a stopgap. We're going to we're going to put guys in here that are not ready for this, situation. And now they're actually trying to craft a legitimate rotation.
Yeah. It's been since they won the World Series and had those years that they added arms like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. Like it's been a long time since they've gone out and done that. So now you can do that. Brady Singer, no pressure. He can go be your 4th or 5th starter. Reagans, you hope, continues his development and is your ace, right? And then you've got some depth in the rotation. They still have work to do. Their outfield's not going to be very good. Kyle Isbell, MJ Melendez, and Hunter Renfroe, That's not a good enough outfield. But if some players develop, it might be. They like Michael Garcia at third. I'm fine with that. Obviously, Bobby Witt Jr. is, is Adam Frazier there. Michael second base is a little weak. You get Vinny Pasquantino back, and I'll take Salvador Perez every day of the week. So it's not like they're not going to be picked to win the division or anything like that, and it'd still be a long shot. But you know what? With an extra wild card, playing in a weak division with respectable starting pitching, and a player like Bobby Witt Jr., get a little more protection, like there's hope. I'm excited for Royals baseball. I am. Like, I think this team can compete. And it was very clear and evident last year that that team couldn't. And it's really been very clear and evident for 3 years that they weren't going to be able to. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen again. I think the likelihood is far lower, Tommy, that it happens again. I mean, it's still possible, but we can't say they haven't tried. And again, I'm not going to sit here on February 20th and say I'm so happy with what they've done. And then if they stink on, May 20th, say, well, they're terrible. No, like they will retain the proper credit for me for trying this, because I haven't had major issue with any of the moves they've made this offseason.
You said something that really stuck with me, and this has really, I think, been the driving force for Kansas City this offseason and going into this year. You mentioned the weak division. You mentioned the AL Central being weak. And I think that, it's the perfect opportunity for Kansas City to strike, because they don't have to beat a team like Houston. They don't have to beat a team like the Dodgers or the Braves in their division. They have to beat the Twins, the White Sox, the Tigers, and the Guardians. It's a weak division. They know that. And so they've put together a team that they feel like can win the division. Not necessarily, I mean, sure, they'd love to win a championship again. Who wouldn't? But that, in my mind, that's not the priority this year. It's
baby steps.
It's baby steps.
Yeah.
It's to get them back into relevance. Right. And because of that division being, probably one of the worst divisions, if not the worst division in Major League Baseball, it's not the NL West. They don't have to compete against, 3 other teams, to win that division. They've just got to be better than the next best. And that's where, the AL Central, I think, is right now.
Right. And
I don't think this is by design, Paul, but what's interesting about that is you're dealing with, because, I don't think anybody thinks Detroit is there, probably not the White Sox this year. So if those are your 2 teams with the propensity to spend a ton, they're 2 teams that are sort of still in a rebuild. So the 3 teams then at the top that you're looking at with, Cleveland and Minnesota, like you've got similar economic factors. And I think that's a good thing for the Royals. I don't know if baseball's done this somehow on purpose. It's just geography, of course, but at least in these central divisions, because it's to some degree this way in the National League too, like you have similar economic components to it, but you do have to strike on that. You do have to take advantage of that the Royals right now aren't just going to get outspent and it feels helpless for them. That is important, Paul, to get out there right now and try to take advantage.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, let's face it, the Royals, I think this is the safest statement, Tommy. The Royals are not going to outspend the Dodgers.
Oh, well, absolutely not.
That was a joke. That was a joke for guys.
Come on.
I mean, come on. I mean,
who is?
Yeah, who is? God Almighty himself, and he might be the only one that can. But with that being said, you're exactly right. And the moves that this Royals team is making, particularly with pitching and relief pitching, the Salvador Perez situation, you got a guy like that behind plate, a leader in the club room, a leader on the field. I mean, all of a sudden you start seeing some of those moves with pitchers, and then you think to yourself, and they're going to be championed by Salvador Perez. I like that. So I think the Royals are barking up the right tree with the way they're approaching, particularly pitching and what they're trying to do. And of course, with the signal that they send with Bobby Witt Jr. being re-signed to whatever that was, it was a huge amount of money, and which is unlike the Royals. You see them making a commitment. And with that, I think people may be this particular year more optimistic than ever before in the last, Tommy, 10 years? Maybe longer?
Well,
maybe even longer?
Almost 10, about
10.
7.
It's been 7 years. There you go.
But look, I think that, you're right. The optimism is there, but I think it's a situation where, at least I think, where else can they go but up? You know, I have to
Oh,
have
well,
optimism because
sure.
it's been it was so bad a year ago. You know, that of course, like the moves they've made, the acquisitions in the offseason, like, okay, well, you know, it's got to be better than what it was a year ago because it was so bad.
What a way to put it. Where can they go but up? I mean,
But they can go flat. They can go
well,
flat
I
because
guess
they
they
keep
can.
doing
Yeah.
that.
I
They
guess,
can
yeah.
stay the course,
Yeah.
and that's what they can't afford to
They
do.
can't
Because
do it.
look, all of a sudden, there is not a hotter sports city in the country, and it has to do with the Chiefs, than Kansas City right now. And I do think that there's a psychological component to that. If the Royals can get a little success, get into a new stadium, if you can capitalize on all that and you have your banner carrier, right, in Bobby Witt Jr., you have that guy. So if you can take all of that right now, there may not ever be an opportunity for the Royals to move into another economic rung that makes sense for them than there is right now, right? If they can capitalize on some of this, get into a new stadium right in the prime of Bobby Witt Jr.'s career, that may be the opportunity to take them from one of the bottom market economic teams to maybe you're in the middle somewhere, which is good enough in baseball. When was the last team that when was the last time the highest payroll won a World Series? Like, they're not equitable. It sure helps to be able to spend money, but take a team like the Braves, like, they spend money because they got successful and then they weren't afraid to spend it, right? Like, it happens all the time. The Royals, some of their biggest payrolls came on the eve of those World Series runs because they could afford to do it because they were putting butts in the seats.
Oh.
So put some butts in the seats, and then maybe you don't have to be one of the lowest spending teams. Still got to get it right in the minor leagues. That's the biggest challenge they face. Their farm system's hot garbage, has been for a little while, and they've had plenty of draft capital to fix it. And they haven't done that. That's still the most important thing for them to do. But this doesn't hurt, and this helps get them there a little bit faster, I think.
Yeah, it helps when you've got the opportunity to draft Bobby Witt Jr. because, you know, the farm system overall is garbage, and I agree with you on that. You know, they were in a really, really advantageous position to get Bobby Witt Jr. when they did, and the way that all kind of panned out. So I think that, and not that I'm willing to sacrifice the overall farm system for the opportunity to have Bobby Witt Jr. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that, yeah, they've missed a lot with their draft picks, and their farm system is not good. They've not done a good job of developing players over the last several years, especially pitchers. You look at the number of pitchers that have went through that farm system and have not developed to become major league ready. It's happened a lot. But that being said, even though they've had a lot of misses, they have been able to be in a position to get a franchise altering player in Bobby Witt Jr. So you have to take the good with the bad, but I'm hopeful that moving forward, they're able to continue to try to find ways to improve that farm system, to draft better, you know, to get players in that organization that can develop over the years so they can have a sustained level of success and not just a flash in the pan like we saw a decade ago.
I mean, if they could have sustained that, I mean, you got to remember, and I'd have to pull this up, but like in those years, right, and the years following, the Royals spent more money than they ever have, and their payroll was respectable, but then they just didn't get it right. And they might have stretched it out.
That's my point.
They might have stretched it out 1 year too far. They probably did, but it was to win at least. And then they went through the rebuild that a lot of teams in baseball go through. They just got it all wrong.
Yeah,
almost all.
That's
Bobby Witt Jr. wasn't wrong.
Right. That's my point, is that they had the roster. They had paid out the contracts. They had guys like Alex Gordon and Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, you know, other guys like that they had paid. And maybe they did hang on to them a little bit too long. But in retrospect, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that there was nobody ready to take their place. Like, their farm system was not in a position, you know, to be able to just turn the keys over to the next generation of Royals. It wasn't there. And so as soon as they lost those guys, there was nobody else that was ready to be able to step in. And that's why we saw the big time decline that we witnessed over the last several years.
And you just have to look within the division, Paul. I mean, Cleveland does it well. Cleveland stays competitive every year. They're able to keep turning it over. Tampa does it. Both those teams do the same thing. The teams that are successful in the small markets all do the same thing. They all develop good young pitching. The Royals have not done that, right? So you start there. You can always supplement and piece together a lineup. Again, look at Tampa as the shining example. Most years when Tampa goes into the season, you might know 2 players in that lineup, maybe. And that's if you're a baseball fan. They always have good pitching. The Royals have not had good pitching. And so they've never developed good pitching, right? Greinke is like the only one. And Yordano Ventura, rest in peace, was the other. Other than that, I'm not a Royals, historian, but that's about it on homegrown pitching. They just don't do it. And if they're successful pitching this year, it won't be homegrown, right? It'll because they traded for Cole Reagans and these 2 free agents worked out. But they've got to figure that out if this is ever going to work. So it's not like I don't want to let them off the hook for how bad it's been. That's not what I'm trying to do. I just am so appreciative of the fact that they're going to give us something to follow every single day. And I'm hopeful more than ever before that they can actually deliver on the promise that they have on, February 20th to actually go out there and just give us 500. Can we set 500 as the bar and shoot for that and see what happens?
Well, I know you're hopeful. You know how I know you guys are hopeful? This is the earliest we've ever really talked to this extent about Royals baseball in the last 7 years. I'll rephrase my 10 years
to be fair, it's the only time they've ever done anything of note this time of year.
But look at it. We're in mid-February. We're in mid-February and taking an entire segment and talking about the Royals. Tommy, when was the last time that ever happened on this show? I can tell you. Let me tell you. Not for a long, long time. And so the optimism is there. And, of course, you get that pitching thing figured out, particularly if you can get them, brought up in your farm system. A lot of good things will happen. But we see the Royals spending money that they haven't done in years. And here we are. Because of that, because of the hope you have, we're talking about the Royals in mid-February.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind with all of this, and Jacob, I know you and I have discussed this before, but because of the added investment that the Royals have put in this offseason, there shouldn't be any excuses for Matt Quatraro in his second year. And again, the expectations,
if it doesn't get done, he's out.
The expectations, of course, need to be appropriate. We're not talking about a championship dynasty or anything right now, but they need to show on the field improvement from a year ago with the added investments they made and the people that they brought over in the pitching staff and in the lineup. They've got to make sure that they show that improvement. And at this point, it's on Matt Quatraro. JJ Piccolo and John Sherman went out and they found some free agents, and Piccolo identified who he wanted that would be upgrades, and John Sherman opened up his pocketbook. So those 2 guys have done their part this offseason. Now it's up to Quatraro and his coaching staff to be able to actually have it translate into success on the field. And there was a lot of discussion at the very tail end of last year about Quatraro and is it going to work with him, even though it was his very first season. And I think, at least I was willing at the time to give him kind of the benefit of the doubt. Like, the roster's not great. It's his very first season as a rookie manager. Give him another year. But at this point now, I'm not sure that, that leash is quite as long. They've got to show that tangible improvement.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, he's going to be, for me, for my money, his seat should be as hot as any seat in Major League Baseball.
Yep.
Right? Like, we're talking mid-season change if it doesn't go well early, kind of a situation. It has got to be better than it was a year ago.
Got to be expectations.
There's no question. It just has to be.
Well, and remember, they brought him.
Screw it up.
Remember, they brought him from Tampa with the expectation of you are part of a coaching staff that knew how to develop talent with not a ton of money. And Tampa Bay has done it year after year after year. And this guy comes over with the expectation that he can do the same thing in Kansas City. It didn't happen last year, but there's an added investment this season. So I think the pressure is back on his shoulders now to get it done.
Tommy, I mean, what significant young player for the Royals, other than Bobby Witt Jr., which is one of the, just a transcendent talent, who got better last year?
Yeah.
That's why that has to be a quick. Nobody got better. You can't have that. That cannot happen. Whoever manages the Royals has to be somebody who gets more out of players than maybe even they've ever had. I mean, it just has to be a key component, right? It has to be. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue all of our conversations here on Sports Daily. 869-1240 is the number to call. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Been a fun Tuesday as we get you ready for a lot of different things. We'll go back to some of the conversation we had yesterday regarding Wichita State. Paul's in. Paul, it is a tough time right now for Shocker basketball. As somebody who's, been around here for a long time, followed it, loves it, passionate about it, where do you sit right now in year one of this? What we hoped maybe wasn't going to be a rebuild certainly is a rebuild. The win's not coming at this point. 3 losses in a row, only 3 wins in their last 18 games. Down the stretch here, what's your feel for everything right now with Shocker basketball?
Well, as a guy who watched almost the entire game on what was it, Sunday? I guess it was Sunday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sunday. It was hard to watch. I mean, this is a team that seems capable of playing, and yet here they are, game after game. Does the 8 to 12 point range sound familiar, Tommy, with how many points you're down, usually from about the 14, 13-minute mark, and now all of a sudden you're playing, maybe 6 to 12 points down almost the rest of the game? Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen it time after time after time. And then you get down those points, and then you play basically consistent basketball with the opponent. And it's frustrating. Frustrating as the dickens. And part of it is, I think it's probably talent. I don't know where this relates, but I know there's got to be at some point some conversations about NIL, dare I say it? I mean, Tommy, I don't want to, and Jacob, I don't want to be that guy who is crass about money, but maybe there needs to be, an examination about how much is being spent, where it's being spent, how much is being raised.
Well, that's a part of it.
I think it's a huge, wait a second. It's a big part of it. It's got to be a big part of it. And there's nothing wrong with it being a big part, because you've got teams in the AAC that you should be competing with. If you're Wichita State, you should be competing. And we're at that point where, what is the conversation? How do things get better? Well, it's not just the old traditional way of going out and finding those kids in the gymnasiums at the high schools and getting them recruited. That's not the way the world works anymore. It's useful use of the NIL, of the portals, of all these things, all the things that are given, the tools used, and you got to use them and use them effectively. Now, we're in the first year, Tommy, of a coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I get that, Jacob. We're growing, but I would like to see growth faster. And I don't think I'm wrong on saying that. Am I?
No, and okay.
No.
So from an NIL perspective, I have to think about it from if I'm a donor, if I'm a guy that has money to be able to donate to NIL, in a lot of these cases, these people who are donating to NIL, there are a lot of big money donors that are out there. And I'm not just talking about with Wichita State. I'm talking about nationwide.
That's right.
That have, they're multimillionaires. Like, they've got they're successful business people, and they view this as an investment into their college football program, their college basketball program, whatever the sport is. And so if I'm a big money donor, if I am looking to invest my money, why am I going to want to throw good money after bad? And I think that's the question. Why would I want to throw in my money? And I'm not saying that, people shouldn't give to NIL, because that's the way of the world, but you have to be a little bit critical of where you are investing your money. If I'm a businessman and I'm given an investment opportunity, I'm going to look it over from top to bottom and say, okay, am I going to see a return on this before I give money? And so in that same regard, if you transfer that to the college athletics landscape, okay, if I'm going to give my money to a program to help pay the players, and I want to make sure that there's going to be a return on that.
Wow.
I want to make sure that they're actually going to win games.
Right.
And so if they're not, and if I don't feel comfortable about that direction, then I'm not sure I'm going to write a check.
Right.
And so in that regard, it's a little bit more. And again, I'm not directly saying that people should not give money. That's not my point.
No, it's chicken and egg, Tommy.
But you've
it's chicken
got to
and
make
egg.
sure
it's chicken
that
and egg, right?
If I'm going to give that money, I want to make sure that there's actually going to be a return on that.
Jacob, do you mind if I hop in real quick?
You can't, Paul, it's chicken and egg. You have to have both. You have to be successful to entice the contributions to NIL, but unless they have contributions to the NIL to get better players, they're not going to get better on the court. So it is hard. It's obviously harder to do that when you're bad, but you have to, because you can't get good if you can't get players.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But isn't that where, even having, some kind of roadmap, or you've got an idea of a game plan on, okay, this is where and I know it's a lot harder to do in the world of the transfer portal, but to be able to say, okay, like this is the way that we are planning on building this, this year, next year, whatever, at that point, like having, that plan, then I feel more comfortable writing a check.
Right. And guys, let me just point out, about a month ago, I didn't bring this up on the show. This is the first time I brought this up. Probably a month ago, I read an article online somewhere, and I cannot remember where it was. I read so many of them. But anyway, there was an article about how teams that are not being successful are having problem retaining their NIL investors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's ironic that you bring this
up. So it doesn't
up.
sound chicken and egg. It sounds it's a direct correlation.
There is.
From,
right, but you can't, what I mean is you're not going to find the success without it, because you can't get the players.
Right.
Now.
But there are programs right now that are struggling retaining. It's not about getting, it's about.
That's to me what the most troubling thing, right? That's what we've always said, snowballing. Like there is no room, there is no time, and that's what makes it so hard. Let's jump to the KFH hotline. Anthony on the line wants to chime in. Anthony, what's up? Welcome into Sports Daily.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? So good to finally get into you guys, and notice you got the savage one there. I haven't heard his voice in a long. Paul, how you doing?
I'm good, big boy. How you doing? You doing all right? It's good to hear you.
Good to hear you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do it like this. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Paul.
Oh, that's enough, Anthony, for God's sakes. Come on now. That's enough.
But, you're talking a subject that I'm interested in. But I don't want to talk about the NIL aspect of it. I want to talk about the mentality of this team. And, what is their game plan? What is their identity? We know they're not really proficient at shooting three-point shots outside of Kobe Rogers. And personally, I think that Quincy Ballard is being misused, because when they do use him to a good capacity, he actually shows up. He could be like a double machine waiting to happen. And sometimes you have to circle back to last year, because Kenny Poto, bless his soul, he's not a three-point shooter. And when Isaac Brown made the switch to say, okay, we're going to play from inside out, is then when we discovered Kenny Poto actually has an inside game. Well, we have two giants, and it seems like our game does not revolve around them. It escapes from them, and we end up reverting back to what we've been used to: three-point shot, bad percentage. I can give you a couple of games where when they played the inside game, you take the SMU game, how many points did they score in the paint? 40 points. What happened? They won that game. Then the other thing is they got to win the free throw battle, because if you look at a lot of their scores, a lot of their games is lost based on the margin of free throws that they didn't shoot as opposed to the other team. Now, you take a Harlan Beverly, I like his game, because what does he do? He's not afraid to drive it to the basket. 1, 2, or 3 things are going to happen. Either he's going to get fouled making a shot, make the traditional three-point play, or he's going to get called for a charge, or something good is going to happen. So they need to.
He turns the ball over a little much, but I'm with you, Anthony. I'm in on Harlan Beverly for sure, and I agree with you in the post. If we think back to Anthony before this season started, I think most of us thought this was going to be a team that its strength came down low because Ballard's healthy, and we were all optimistic about Poto. There aren't a lot of teams in college basketball that can run out 2 7-footers like that. Right. Now, it hasn't translated, but that's what we thought it was going to be.
And to that point, I even learned something from watching some high school games. I actually got to some high school games. I got to see May South and I got to see Derby. And I'm going to even use the Derby's girls game, for instance, because I had their coach on my podcast. And he says, we're not afraid to play bully ball. That means we're not afraid to tell our girls in the paint, sometimes you just have to play bully ball, back your opponent down, and get the 2 points. And with the 6'10" and the 6'11" guy, They should be playing some bully ball and make the other team stop you from playing it. That's my whole thing. Now, as far as moving forward, because Coach Flory at Derby made this statement. He said after they lost the game to Mays South, he said, I'm okay with the loss so long as you're not playing defeated. I think at this point, this team, they've lost so much, now they're playing defeated. In other words, the game is already lost before the game is even started. So moving forward, you're talking about NIL and, recruiting. They got a pretty good recruiting class. But I'm going to give you a dark horse. I think the point guard situation is still unsettled. I think they should look at their kid at Mays South. His name is Michael Cakes. I think they need to give him a long look. On that note, I'm out. You guys have a great Tuesday.
Appreciate it, Anthony. Great call. Appreciate your insight and always your thoughts here on Sports Daily. Yeah, I hope that, and that's the big challenge to see from this team this week with 2 home games against teams that are at the bottom of the league, is that they're not playing defeated, right? Like they can come out and erase that thought with a big week this week. It's just, we got to see that bigger picture when we talk about it and rebuilds and the time it takes. That's, Tommy, the most challenging thing about all of this. And, we heard from Kevin Saul yesterday and, wanting to, point out how difficult and is sometimes these take time. And I understand that and I appreciate this, but this is, the caution we threw out initially is, I don't know if there is the same amount of time that there used to be. I don't know that there is the same amount of time. If you want a direct comparison to what Greg Marshall did at Wichita State, and even with this program, I don't know that it's the same. I think it has to come a little quicker because the danger is it's snowballing on you and you do lose the support. You can't get the players. You're not going to turn it around unless you get the players. It all sort of has to happen at the same time. And that's, I think, what's so scary. Scary may be the best way to describe this season for me. It's scary because I don't, and again, and I'm not a part of the conversation with the donors. I have no idea, legitimately no idea what that tone is right now to be able to get what you need to get done to get players. But if you can't get players and you're losing that interest, then it's going to be even harder to get players.
At a place like Wichita State, NIL should never really be an issue. That you're not competing with football. You're not competing with other major D1 universities, that are right around the area. You have to go a couple of hours away, to do that. So really this entire metro area, I know there are other sports at Wichita State, obviously, but there should never really be an issue with NIL dollars for basketball. And so if there are issues, and I know that, it's been well documented how behind the 8 ball the university was with NIL before Kevin Saul even came in as athletic director. That's been very well documented, and how basically things have needed to be built from the ground up. So that's been in place for a long time. And I think that you mentioned the snowball perspective. I mean, I think we need to be fair. The truth is this has been snowballing for a number of years. The snowball didn't start this season. The snowball didn't start with the hiring of Paul Mills. The snowball started several years ago. I mean, you could probably have to go back to the Greg Marshall situation. That was really when the snowball first started. There just hasn't really been opportunities to stop that snowball from rolling down the hill and getting bigger.
Right.
And the bigger it gets, the more difficult it's going to be to get it to stop, because that momentum is gaining steam and that snowball is getting larger and larger and larger.
And to your point, that snowball, it also includes the fact that nobody's in that arena from the turns where you walk in, the ramps up to the ceiling. There's nobody in the arena. And that wasn't the way it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Look,
and that's
winning cures all, though, doesn't it, Paul? Winning cures all.
Oh, boy. Truer words have never been said on this show.
Tomorrow, an opportunity to do that. 8 o'clock tip against Tulsa. Sunday, a good opportunity to do that. 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon tip against Temple. Both nationally televised games. Good opportunities for, the team to go flex a little bit. We haven't seen it happen. We'd love to see it happen. And they will not have a better chance than this week with those two teams at home to make it happen. Ball's in their court. Challenge is out there. Let's see if they can get it done. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. Last full segment of Sports Daily right after this. Welcome back into Sports Daily, everybody. Glad to have Paul Savage in, helping us out on Tuesdays. Paul, speaking of, Mr. Savage, the world-famous, the world-renowned football coach, we got a little announcement to make. What's going on with you? All I get is a text from Paul saying, I got a coaching announcement to make. What in the world's going on for Paul Savage? You're always up to something.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity, and nobody knows. I'm breaking this to all my friends. Tommy and Jad, and you are the only, and Tony also, you're the only 4 guys that know this, but I've been offered the assistant job coaching the offense and defensive line for the Salina Liberty of the Arena Football League. Yeah, that's right, Tommy. We're going right back
look at that.
to the Arena League. I never thought I would ever have the chance to coach in the Arena League, but here we are. I've got that chance, and I'm going to coach with Salina this year. Boy, it's going to be great football. I mean, they're paying those kids big money. I mean, it's not, it's not the $250, $300, $400 deal. It's in the thousands of those that per game for those kids. And I'm telling you what, it's going to be really exciting. Coach O'Neill, Huron O'Neill, has offered me the chance to come coach with them, and I'm going to do it, boys. And I want to thank Tommy. He has worked with me with regards to the show and meetings and stuff. I can basically, for the next, for 10 weeks during the season, you guys are going to work with me, and a couple of days I can't be in, but Tommy's working with me to get me in every day. Or every week, at least one day. Tommy, thank you for working with me.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
Congratulations to you. I mean,
thank you.
That's awesome. And I know that the Liberty's been around for a few years, and this is the original Arena Football League, right?
One of our games, we travel and play the New Orleans Voodoo. I mean, it's right. The Philadelphia Solar. I'm really excited about coaching at this level.
Well, they made a heck of a decision up there in Salina, and you're going to kill it as you always do up there. I do have one concern, though.
What's that?
There's a commute to Salina involved here, and I just are you allowed to drive after dark?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's old people jokes are not funny.
How is that?
I don't. What are you laughing at?
I mean, that's a good. He's got a good point.
I'm concerned for your safety, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you.
You still good? You still allowed?
I'm good. No,
okay.
All right. My license. I could. But by the way, Coach Carlos Kavanaugh, who I coached as a Wild football player for a few years, and coached with him at East, he was offered the offensive coordinator job, and he's got. Gosh, I mean, he's been the head coach in Dallas, indoor football team in Dallas, and all other places. So he's going to be an offensive coordinator, and I'm going to coach the offense and defense. So we'll drive together on practice. We only practice 2 days a week.
Extra set of eyes.
Yeah, thank you. And he's a lot younger than me. How's that? Does that make you feel better?
It does. I'm concerned for your safety, Paul. We need you here.
Well, geez, thank you. But anyway, thank you for letting me announce.
Congratulations.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, Jacob, did you see the breaking news that just came down? So the College Football Committee unanimously approved the 5 and 7 model for the new 12-team playoff to put it into place this fall. So the 5+7 model. So the 5 conference champions and 7 at-larges. And then they're gonna do this right away.
Well, it's got to be whatever the Pac-12 would be, I guess.
That's what they're.
I don't know what else it would. Who else would it be? And by the way, there is a little news with the Pac-12. They hired a new commission. Guys, I'm missing something. I didn't know the Pac-12.
Oh, 5 hang on, 5 highest ranked conference champions. Right. Okay, so here's why I think this is awesome.
Okay,
it's not necessarily that it's the Pac-12. It could be anybody. And this is going to also add to it, because basically what that does, whatever the Pac-12 looks like now, it's not going to look like a traditional Power 5. So what a 5 and 7 model maintains with just the highest ranked conference champions is it essentially maintains a Cinderella in there every year, right? Like we're always going to get an AAC representative, probably most likely. But some of the other leagues too, Mountain West, perhaps, right? Mountain West it's going to give representation to that team we always want to see get in there and mix it up.
Maybe the American,
the Sun Belt could be a conference where you could see.
Now it could be that league has gotten a whole lot better.
And the American, decent. I mean, there's several teams.
Cincinnati, UCF in years past, not anymore.
Not
but
now.
Just think back to years past.
Right.
Most of those teams, Boise State of years past, like it still gets us in that team, which I think has always been important, and then the 7, right? And it gives you your power 4 now, conference champions, which is the most critical piece. But then the next 7, I'm fine with that, because there are times where maybe those next 7, 4 of them are SEC teams. And I think if all of us are being honest with ourselves, we would say, yeah, okay, that's true.
Right.
Like, that's fine.
Right.
It does seem to solve a lot, Tommy. It makes sure that we don't have a situation like we did this year. It makes sure that a team like Alabama, who struggled early but came on late, still has a place, because that's important too. It is still about being the best team at the end of the season and not the beginning of the season.
And I like that they're doing this to start this fall. They're not putting it off. It's not going to happen a couple of years from now. It's going to happen starting this coming season. So it's a good quick change. I'm glad they did it.
Mountain 12 may not be the conference you want, because it's going to get absorbed a little bit by the Pac-12, I think. We don't know.
We'll see. I don't know what the Pac-12 looks like. Topic for another day. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. I mean, now, if you're like, the biggest winner in this is probably like Washington State and Oregon State, right? They've still got an opportunity now. They feel like to go play for a CFP title. Just win whatever league it happens to be that they end up in. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network today next.
Odyssey, Wichita's most listened to sports radio. 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, everybody. Glad to be here with you. Thanks to Paul. Thanks to Tommy for stopping in today. Coming up tonight, well, it's regular programming. Haven't had that in a while. So you've got Jim Rome immediately following us at 11, Bob and Jeff locally from 2 to 4, and then CBS Sports Radio programming takes you the rest of the way. Catch our breath here, everybody, before the Shockers are in action then again tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. Glad to be with you. It'll be another Sports Daily for Jad Chambers, for Tommy Castor, for Paul Savage. I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll see you then.
Sports, lighter news, and great comedy with Bob and Tom mornings. 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
All right, let's go in 3, 2, 1. Coming up on a Wednesday edition of Sports Daily, it's a Shocker game day. Can Wichita State get things turned around and headed in the right direction down the home stretch of this regular season? We'll talk about that and everything else going on in the sports world. It's Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor on Wichita's most listened